Hello Naka and welcome to For the Record. The agricultural sector in Fiji has long been said to have a lot of potential for growth and to become a major player in Fiji's economy. A number of government initiatives have been introduced over a number of years to try and get more people into farming and to make currently existing farms more sustainable, more economic and more profitable, and to be able to contribute on a commercial level, not just locally but for exports as well. A number of organizations are involved in these efforts, one of which is the Fiji Crop and Livestock Council, and I'm joined by the chair of the Fiji Crop and Livestock Council, Simon Cole. Simon is also the chair of the Fiji Cooperative Dairy Company Limited, and he owns a farm. He is the owner of Vunda Piggery, and he'll be speaking with us over the course of the next hour or so. Simon, thank you very much for joining us. It's a very diverse industry, agriculture in Fiji. We're talking everything from dalo farming to yangona to sheep and cattle and pigs.
Yep.
Piggery, you yourself own
Yes.
a piggery. But we've always spoken about how it's on the cusp of a huge growth, becoming semi-commercial or fully commercial, and supplying not just locally but around the world. Over the years, you've been working in Fiji for the last 34 years.
Yep.
Over that time, we have made progress, we have moved forward, but we still seem to be at the edge of that cusp to some extent. How have we not been able to tap into all that potential?
I think I want to start looking at some of the successes we have had in agriculture. And I remember when I first came here, salad crops in this country were just 3 floppy leaves of lettuce in the months of July. And now we have a salad crop farming system and markets full of salad crops almost through the year, and a lot of work done by the farmers in Singatoka and around the farmers in this Suva Central area, producing a whole range of crops now, and that's a stunning success. And I've been able to travel to other countries in the Pacific, and they are nowhere near our ability to produce salad crops. So you have to take your hat off to the farmers who have commercialized and produced crops that we need, and they are able to sell in the market. Another success too is the chicken industry. The chicken industry has grown dramatically here, and now I think more than 50% of the meat we consume is locally grown chicken. So there have been some really good successes. Dalo expanded into a vacuum that was left by Samoa when Samoa had leaf blight, and our dalo farmers stepped up and filled that export market to New Zealand and Australia. Samoa is coming back now, so they've got challenges there. The pig industry, my own industry, we supply about 80% of the local pork in this country, and that's quite an achievement to do that. So a lot of people talk down on agricultural, but there are actually a lot of things are going on, a lot of successes that are worth noting, and our farmers are quite competitive in what they do.
That has happened to a large extent over the last 30 years that you've observed, but there is still a huge gap, isn't there?
Yep.
We still need to be able to be sustainable and to be consistent in supply.
Yep.
That's one of the issues that we hear about, that you may have a certain product one week, but the next week the delivery doesn't come in.
This is to do with small islands, and we have very, very thin markets. And what I mean by a thin market is that it is very easy to go from oversupply to undersupply very quickly, because the demand is not huge. The farmers have it, they satisfy the demand, saturate the demand, and then the demand has gone. And there is no, because it's not a huge market, they're not able to sell that product somewhere else. And this is recognized because of the scale of the markets that we are working in. These thin markets make it very difficult to get it right all the time. And something, if we talk about the council, one of the services the council wants to introduce possibly is to poll farmers and say, look, are you planting more of this crop this year than you did last year? Are you planting more dalo? Are you planting more lettuce? And if we get an indication that more people are planting, we can send that message out to farmers and say, look, it looks as if more people are planting this crop So it's probably better to move somewhere else. We don't want to wait until the price collapses and then say, oh, perhaps I shouldn't have planted it, because you've got the crop in the ground, you've got 9 months of work, and you can't get rid of it. So hopefully we can help farmers with their planning. But the interesting thing is that if the price does collapse, that's probably the best time to go out and plant, because nobody else will be planting. And of course then we go the other way, we go into a dip instead of a peak.
One of your areas of expertise is planned
Yes.
farming and,
Yep.
and agriculture management.
Yes.
Have you seen a lot of local farmers picking it up? Because you talk about a farmer, people will think somebody who's lived on a farm all his life, using traditional practices, probably and most likely has not had higher education, but when it comes to their knowledge of farming and the expertise that they have in farming, that's possibly unmatched.
I admire our farmers because I think they are better at it than I am. I need to get a spreadsheet and I need to put it on numbers and figures and plans. And that, of course, is important when you're talking to banks and to stakeholders about what are you doing with your farm and how you're doing it. But I think farmers have an inbuilt understanding of what they are doing, and they know instinctively when it is not worth investing in a crop. They can't put it on a piece of paper, but they do have that real depth of understanding about what they are doing, and that impresses me sometimes, that they do know what they are doing, and they know when they are not getting the returns, and therefore they will move into another crop.
And is that one of the reasons that they may be staying semi-commercial, not being able to grow into a fully commercial business entity? Because they're not used to these numbers and balance sheets and
I
spreadsheets.
think possibly one of the things we've developed at the council is, and I put the banking system in there as well, and I think there's a huge gap between farmers and bankers, and I think the council has an opportunity to bridge that gap. The farmers understand the production, but they don't understand finances. The bankers understand finances, but they don't understand production. And so with this spreadsheet system that we have developed, you are able to take the farmer's knowledge, put it into a financial model. It will come out with the financial balance sheets and accounts and ratios that the banks need to assess the project. And because it's in a spreadsheet format, you can do what if. What if the price goes up? What if the price goes down? What if this cost goes up? And then you can drill down onto what are the key parameters driving the success or failure of that business. And so we can build a better understanding, both with the farmers on what his price of Darlow means to the bank, and also what the yield of Darlow means to the farmer. So there's it's looking for that understanding, I think, will allow our farmers to get better investments and better models, better understanding of their business, because that's where we're trying to go.
And with that, we've come to the end of our first segment. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll look at how we can move the industry forward. Naka, welcome back to For the Record. We're talking about the agriculture industry, and my guest tonight is the chair of the Fiji Crop and Livestock Council, Simon Cole. Simon, you travel around the country. You speak to a lot of farmers. What are the three common pieces of advice that you have to give them in order for them to be able to grow their business?
As we've discussed, I'm a planner, agricultural number cruncher. I look at farming from the business and the planning side of it. The key thing I believe farmers should do, and that they don't do, is keep records of what they are achieving. And I've had an opportunity to design record-keeping systems for non-record-keeping farmers. And this is important because if you're not, farmers are optimists. I think you have to be an optimist to be a farmer. And so you remember all of the good things that you do in pig production. They say, oh, my sow gave me so many piglets and I had so many litters per year and all of this. Yes, you did, but you also had a sow that gave you no piglets at all, and you had a high mortality here, but you tend to forget that. If you set up a record-keeping system, then you can identify exactly what you are doing, and I think that's the most important thing for farmers to do if we're going to change their mindset into becoming more business-like. And I think that goes on for the number of days they employ in their crops. If you look at most of our salad crops and vegetable crops, the major input cost is their days of labor. And how many days of labor do you put into the crop? What return are you getting on your labor? These are things. So again, it's recording what you do and using that knowledge to understand what your business is about. And as I said, I think most farmers miss this opportunity. They don't think of their farms from a record-keeping point of view. They just remember all the good things and wonder why, they say they're getting all this good production, but then they say that we've got no money in the bank. Well, actually, if you're getting good production, you should have money in the bank. And so it's trying to sort out that conundrum, I think, is important for farmers to do. Markets, find the market. That's key, as we already discussed. Thin markets here are a huge problem. You just have to be careful, understand what crop you're getting into and where your market is eventually going to be.
The Fiji Crop and Livestock Council has 12 associations and 33,000 farmers we're talking about.
Yes.
These are farmers of all levels. We're talking about commercial, semi-commercial, and those who supply to the markets. When we pool this together, what is the potential here?
The potential is huge, but I think as a council we need, and as a government we need to be careful on where we are working with farmers. We have 33,000 farmers registered, and it'll probably go up closer to 50,000. As government is following a policy. It wants to leave nobody behind, and therefore it wants to interact with all farmers. And that's an ideal policy for social development and keeping the agricultural sector and the rural sector working. But then where does our commercial production come from? And are the policies for rural development and commercial agricultural production the same? And I think both as a council and as government, we need to be very clear what we are able to do for these people. We want as many people involved in agriculture as possible. I think it's 40% of the population is still involved in agriculture. But if you go overseas, that's down to 1 or 2% of the population still involved in food production. So they're very different systems out there. And how are we going to move towards more commercial production? I think this is something we need to work with government to understand and work with farmers to understand, to move the industry to a more business-like footing.
There's a lot of technological advancements in farming, but majority of the farmers here still use traditional methods, and they don't have huge plants and machinery. Do we need it?
No, I don't think you do. I think the word I'm always using is efficiency. You need to work out what is the most efficient way to produce your crop. And you classify a farmer as a subsistence farmer. That really doesn't worry me. If he's a subsistence farmer or the size of Crest chicken, he has to be efficient at what he does. If he's efficient, then he will be able to sell his produce somewhere. And this categorization of you're a subsistence or subsistence plus or commercial, forget it. Believe me, as a commercial farmer, I know I'm not efficient sometimes, and that hurts my income, and I have to focus my management efforts to become efficient. And that applies at any scale across the board. So as long as you're a small farmer, as long as you're working on I'm doing this well, I have a good product, I'm able to sell it, my costs are under control, you don't need to have a huge machine to achieve that. That's not necessary. But focusing on efficiencies, I think, is more important.
The government has introduced an initiative for young Fijians to go
Yep.
to school, study farming. When you graduate, you get a grant,
Yes.
and you get a piece of land to start your farm.
Yes.
This has been going on for, I think, for the last few years,
Yes.
2 to 3 years.
Yes.
Has the council seen any?
We've actually raised this issue as a council. We raised it with government at a couple of seminars because they have done the education for farmers, but I don't think they have come through yet with cash and with land available for young farmers to start. We've certainly had some farmers come to the council and say, look, we thought we were going to get this, and we've passed this on to government and said, look, please make sure that this scheme works. As an industry, we are getting older. As an industry, farmers, the average age of farmers is getting older and older, and that's, I think, a reflection of younger people not able to see a business opportunity in farming. It's hard work. A lot of it is very hard work, and that doesn't fit with the lifestyle of many young people.
Well, the dream always is to get an education and get
Yep.
a better job.
Yep.
That's always the dream, isn't it?
That's right. Agriculture can provide that, and there are a number of examples in this country where people who have started with nothing have built successful careers in agriculture, and obviously thousands of examples where people are supporting their families through their agricultural efforts. But it's not regarded as a glitzy career that this is where I want to end up. I think previously people who have been educated in agriculture, their goal is to move into the ministry as an extension officer or the bank as a loans or as a teacher in agriculture. We need to change our agricultural education to train people to farm on the field more rather than look for the office job. I enjoyed it. I farmed in the UK, driving tractors, moving straw bales, milking cows, and all the rest of it. I have a grounding in agriculture and still work at the farm now. I enjoy that. That's part of the fun of it. But not a lot of other young kids see it that way.
Well, I mean, I'd like to talk more about kids or future generations getting involved in farming. But right now we have to take a break. We'll pick it up after this break. Good evening and welcome back to the show. My guest tonight is Simon Cole, the chair of the Fiji Crop and Livestock Council, as well as the chair of the Fiji Cooperative Dairy Company Limited. Simon, before the break you mentioned how a lot of younger people don't find farming very attractive. Is the council concerned that we may come to a time where we run out of farmers, or we run out of manpower across the industry?
No, you talk about manpower, and I think if you look at the sugar industry, there is now talk of there's a lack of cane cutters to cut cane, and that is being taken over by mechanization. And if you study agriculture around the world, agricultural moves to fewer larger farms with more people or with less people involved in the farming activity. And we were talking about this difference in policy about leaving no one behind, and yet the business trend in agriculture is to move to fewer larger farms with less people involved, more mechanization.
Well, I mean,
and it's that progression that is going to be hard to work through.
Yes, the question, what I meant to ask was, if the son or daughter moves to the urban center, finds a job and doesn't want to come back to the farm, what happens to the farm? And
this, and if you extend what we were just talking about, the land issue then becomes a constraint, because we have fairly small parcels of land, and if you're going to move to fewer larger farms, then there have to be mechanisms to merge those smaller blocks together to make it big enough for a farmer to say, yes, this is enough for me to support my family. I can see a business in here which is going to give my family the income that I need to get them to school, to get them food, to get them the things they need in the house. And this is part of the whole planning process. And one of the things, when we look at a farm, whether it's a monocrop or whether it's a multi-crop farm, is the farmer earning enough from his farming activities to say, yes, this is how I'm going to earn my living. And that's very important. I think that will, if we look at it like that, how big has the farm got to be for him to be able to achieve that? Obviously different crops, different sizes. But the era of small farms and small land holdings, I think, is history, as it has been in most other parts of the world. And we need to move forward in that direction and understand that. What does the farmer need to make a living from farming? That's the only way we're going to attract people into this industry.
And what then happens to these farmers with the small lots who have nowhere to move and no growth? I mean,
they will continue to farm. And this is what we're saying. What are we doing with farming? Is farming a social support mechanism, or is farming a commercial business? And you don't say to the processors, oh, you have to keep so many people employed because we need to keep so many people employed. And yet agriculture is supposed to carry this sort of social obligation costs. And this is exactly what we're saying. We need to rationalize, what are we doing? Are we going to be a social support mechanism, or are we going to drive the business of agriculture? And a lot of planning, a lot of thinking needs to go into this. There's not an easy answer, and there's not a couple of year answer. This is a generational discussion. But overall, agriculture will move to fewer, larger farms.
And when we talk about the council, your 33,000 members, do they have this message, and how do they see the industry, and where do they see it heading?
Obviously, with 33,000 members, I haven't been able to talk to all of them. We're structured with the heads of our commodity associations, and these people have been elected by their members, and I think it's best to ask them where they see their different commodity associations heading. As the pig industry, and this is fairly typical of a lot of agriculture here, there are 3 large commercial farms in this country which probably produce more than 50% of the commercial production. There's about 10 to 15 medium-sized farms that produce the rest of the commercial production. But there is a huge number of small farms that probably produce 50% of the total consumption. It never hits the markets, it never gets into the shops, it never goes through the abattoirs. And that's the same in a lot of our industries, that the domestic production is a key role, has a key role in our food safety and food security issues here. It's not commercial, you're not seeing it, but in the Lao group, there's a lot of pigs in the Lao group. These are being consumed, so they're not buying meat from overseas. The Muslim festival of Qurbani, huge quantities of sheep meat and cattle, goat meat, go into these festivals. Mangiti, the Mangiti festivals in the Fijian system, are key drivers of our agricultural sector. And these are very short value chain systems. It's farmer to end user. And so the farmer gets a good price and the customer gets a good price. And that's why they're so successful. The problem is that wholesale production will come in underneath that and eventually make the Mangiti product too expensive to use. But this is not going to change in a hurry. The Mangiti system and these festivals, Qurbani, are here for a long time to come.
They're here to stay, pretty much.
Very much. And interesting, because the perceptions of quality in these markets are very different to the perceptions of quality in the more commercial markets. If you look at chicken, a nice, tender, soft bird is what is produced in our commercial chicken market and what we eat a lot of. But for a function using a jungly murgi, that chicken has to be pretty tough, not so much meat on it, good bit of fat to give it flavor. Different perception altogether. Size is more important in a beef, a Mangiti for a beef animal. The bigger the animal, the better the presentation is for Mangiti. Tenderness, not relevant in the markets that are in Fiji. So we have different markets that we need to work with.
Just finally, with regards to the council, the spirit of the council is to grow agriculture and to provide a bridge between the government and the industry and move it forward. Where do you see things going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Our role is to explain the business of agriculture, and government asked us to do this. Government recognised that its initiatives in agriculture were not bearing fruit as much as they wanted, and the then Minister, Joe Dhokanasinghe, said, look, we need to build this bridge. And government, through the council, now has a structured bridge to all the agricultural commodities and people, and I appreciate the leaders of our associations because they understand their crops well, and they have been picked by their members as people who do understand their crops well, and they're able to talk professionally about their crops to government, and we've got them into places where they are able to get their voice heard. So our job is to explain the business of agriculture to government. If you're going to do this, then this is what is likely to happen in the business of agriculture. And that's where we want to go with this. How's it going to work? We have 3 pillars. Advocacy. A small organisation, there's only 4 or 5 of us. We do not control anything, but we are able to talk, and government opens the door and allows us to talk to key stakeholders in the industry, and so we're able to lobby for what the farmers want. Membership. I cannot advocate unless I have the membership behind me to say, yes, we truly do represent all the Dalo farmers, or the majority of the Dalo farmers. And then the glue to hold this together is information, that we need to share information from the farmers to the centre, from the centre to the farmers. So that's where we want to go with this. And that's a huge challenge, obviously, with the number of farmers involved in the association.
All right, with that, Simon will take a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be back shortly. Good evening and welcome back to the show. Simon, let's talk about the Fiji Cooperative Dairy Company Limited, of which you are also chairman. The cooperative represents the farmers who sell to Rewa Dairy as it exists now. At one point, brucellosis almost wiped out the cattle supply and the ability to produce milk. Now, I understand tuberculosis is also resulting in a lot of losses.
Yes, TB is, I think, worse. I wasn't involved when the brucellosis outbreak took place, but I know the Ministry's veterinary services jumped on top of the brucellosis outbreak and have controlled that, and have moved on to TB now. And TB is decimating our industry. I think we're going to lose probably 20% of our milking herd. This comes, of course, after Cyclone Winston earlier this year, which didn't help, went straight through that whole dairy farming area in North Tailevu. And the farmers are really struggling with this. This is probably costing us $1.6 million worth of milk every year, and the farmers have lost cattle to the value of $500,000. That's their meat value, but that animal was worth a hell of a lot more as a milk production animal rather than turning it into beef. So big problem for the industry with TB.
This compounds the problems that the industry was already facing with declining production.
No, I think if you look at the figures, production was stable and increasing. I think early in 2015 we had some of the higher figures, production figures. It is very much concentrated since that TB, that decline in production has been, and the TB testing has been going on for almost 2 years now, and will likely take 5 more years to get it out of the system. Whilst we might be over the peak in the number of infections, to actually eradicate it completely or to bring it very low level of infection, we've got 5 more years of this to go through. This is a devastating time for dairy farmers.
What does that then mean for the farmers the next 5 years? I mean, are we talking about sustaining losses?
Yes, they're hurting.
And we're talking, I mean, they're not all, we're not talking about fully commercial farmers. Some of them are smallholder farms as well, who rely on day-to-day production.
This is a cash income for them. This is commercial farming. And I was talking to somebody, and he talked of the importance. It was a $75 check every fortnight or every week or whatever that came to the village for the lads who had done the milking. And it might not seem a lot of money on a commercial farming scale, but he talked of the importance of that cash income to farmers living in the village. And I think, and we've talked about scale. Scale doesn't matter. Efficiency in business, I think, is what we need to push. You can be a very successful small-scale farmer as long as you are efficient. If you're not efficient, then you're going to struggle.
Is it a possibility that some of these farms may not be able to carry on in the next 5 years?
Absolutely. We have already lost 2 or 3 farms, and not the small ones. Big ones are going. This is devastating for this industry. Absolutely devastating.
What do we need to do then?
I think we need to go back to that separation process. The old Rewa Dairy Company had some problems, and government stepped in and instigated the separation process. And basically what they did was to sell off the farmer's asset of the production company to FDL to clear the debts of the old Rewa Dairy Company. So the farmers, instead of owning 100% of the processing facility, now only own 20%. So they lost their asset to clear off their debts. In that process, government put in a protection mechanism for the dairy industry, which is used by the processor. He does not pay duty on imported products. And the farmers are looking for an equitable sharing of that protection that's been afforded by government to the industry. We have worked through the council. The council picked this up. The Dairy Association came to the council and said, look, we've got a problem here. The council took it up to Fiji government and also with the assistance of the New Zealand government. This is exactly the sort of thing we're supposed to do. Said, we've got a problem here. We need to sit down and discuss this. And so we've worked with a team to put in place a milk supply agreement. A number of other issues were brought into that. The proper testing of milk, so that there's an audit trail. When a farmer is downgraded on his milk, he knows that that test has been done properly. Resolved a number of issues on the use of the chilling centres. Arbitration processes were put in and an industry body has been established. But we are still struggling on the price to the farmers, particularly at this time when they need to invest back into the industry.
That was going to be my next question, because pricing has always been an issue, farm gate prices. What are they at now, and what does the cooperative believe would be an adequate price?
I think the unfortunate thing about the negotiations we had last year is that the world market price for dairy products was very, very low. Before that, when New Zealand was on a high, our farmers were actually producing milk cheaper than New Zealand farmers. And if you look at the different systems, and our pastures here are not conducive to producing milk as cheaply as New Zealand's pastures, there's no way we can compete with New Zealand. And we don't have to compete with New Zealand because New Zealand is a processed dairy product market. We have in Fiji a liquid milk market on our doorstep, as does Europe, as does a lot of Australia. And if you look at the prices that these liquid milk markets are getting, we are quite competitive with that. And our farmers don't believe that they are getting a fair share of the protection that government has afforded the industry reflected in their milk price.
The farmer's share.
Farmer's share.
Again, what is the price now? And as you are negotiating, what would the farmers be happy with?
The price at the minute is 87 cents. We want to get it to a minimum of $1 per litre, which is where government actually put it. Government put it at $1 per litre. It was later changed down to 87 cents by the processing company. It was a confusion on whether it was a VEP price or a VIP price. And it was taken down at a time when world market milk prices were through the roof. now with Winston, if you want farmers to invest back into this business, government has to create the right environment for them to
But then
invest.
government, when it made the split, felt that it was creating the right environment.
Yes.
Have things changed?
We continue to put this case to them. We've been doing it now for over a year, and we'll continue to put it to them.
Given the situation on the ground, TB wiping out
Yes.
stock,
Yeah.
low low farm gate prices, do you feel that farmers right now are able to produce as much as they would if they had that extra income coming in? Is that connected in any way?
Oh, absolutely. As we said earlier on, farmers, they don't need a spreadsheet to work out what's profitable. They know it in their head. And at the minute, they know they're not seeing a good return from dairy farming.
Well, and the other point is somebody who may be watching at home tonight will say, look, if farmers are paying 80 cents or even up to $1 at the farm gate, the milk that they buy in the supermarket from dairy is more than double, almost triple the price.
We need to look at the protection that is being afforded to the industry, to the processor. The protection that he gets, as determined by the consultants that studied this, is about $12 million per year. He's buying $8 million worth of milk from the farmers. So actually he's getting the milk at 150% off. And this is why we're saying, look, we want some equity in this. So that the price of the milk in that carton, a lot of it is not the milk. The processor is buying it, or he's being given protection to the value of 150% of the milk he purchases.
Okay, we've ended another segment. We have to take a short break. We'll be back after this. Good evening and welcome back to the show. Simon, we're pretty much coming to the end of the show, but you've been talking about how farming can be successful and you can make a career out of it. You yourself, since you moved to Fiji, have been involved in piggery since 1993.
Yep.
And you mentioned earlier that it's one of the larger farms in Fiji.
Yep.
How did that come about? How does a piggery become a fully commercial company that makes profits and employs people?
It goes back to what we were talking about. I'm not a pig farmer. I'm an agricultural number cruncher, records, management systems, all of that. And I understand livestock, obviously, and I understand pig farming systems to a point. But it was applying all of those, look at your business as a business. Look at your farm as a business. And we do a lot of record keeping at the farm. We know the problems that we have got in our production. I liken it to juggling 5 balls at a time. And I can juggle 4 at a time, but always one of them hits the floor, and it's identifying which one is wrong and then working to fix that one, and then you start, and then another one hits the floor. And that's what keeps you going, trying to get all of these production parameters going in the right direction and costs in the right direction, and that's what makes a successful business.
And also the Yangara company,
Yes.
the farm in Ra.
Yes.
For a number of years it was seen as I'm talking about way back when, I don't know, it was stagnating, almost a failed venture, but I hear now that it has picked up and production is
the important
at a peak.
thing, and I take my hat off to Peter Drysdale and Elisapethi Talitha, to the previous chairman and the CEO. They made the farm profitable as a farming venture, and I think that was important. Yangara is in a strange position that it gets money from Fiji Water, whose factory is right in the middle of the property, and so Yangara always had cash. But the effort now and the success that we have achieved is that the farm is profitable in its own right, and that is important. We had a disastrous year with the drought last year, and that impacts on our sales this year. But the farm is profitable, and I think that's a very, again, it's focusing on the basics, getting your production figures right and getting your costs completely under control and understanding that relationship. That's what you have to do.
You were talking about Yangara possibly exporting meat, beef.
Yes, there's been an inquiry from the Solomons. They're looking for breeder cattle. One of the issues we've had here is with TB. We're not able to move or sell cattle into TB-affected regions, so we have a surplus of breeding stock, and the Solomons is interested in purchasing those. Hopefully by the end of the year that deal will be concluded.
Well, last question, very quickly, we're out of time, but agriculture, healthy food, we're talking about fresh produce and
Yep.
talking about good quality meat, but people today tend towards processed food more than anything else.
Yes.
I mean, how does that play into the industry? Very quickly.
Where we started this talk, go to the market. There is a stunning range of fresh produce available, locally grown fresh produce. It's nutritious. Fruits, vegetables, they're all over the place, and I think we need to stay there. If you're eating chicken in this country, it's grown in this country. If you're eating pork, 80% of it's grown in this country. We're not as bad as people think. I think it's a lot of people push down on agriculture. It's regarded as an industry that if you don't do anything else, you go farming. Well, that's wrong. This is a business, and all the business rules have to apply to what you're doing in agriculture. Scale is not important. Efficiency is important. Come up with the produce that people want. We export. We're able to get our products overseas. We're not as bad as a lot of people make out. And the council's role is to keep pushing this message. We talked about the price of pork. I'm producing pork at the same price as the Australian farm gate price. That's a success. They can import pork products into this country cheaper than we can process them here. That's not a problem with our farmers. That's a problem with the processing and the import costs and subsidies in overseas markets and systems like that. And these are arguments that the council will continue to push for farmers, so that the business of agriculture is explained to the stakeholders. Don't just blame agriculture and say you have to get better at this. Let's look at the whole picture professionally and come up with the right solution.
Simon, thank you very much for your time, and best of luck.
Thanks a lot.
That was For the Record this evening. Remember, if you have comments or questions, you can email us, fortherecord@fbc.com.fj. I'll be back again next Sunday. Until then, good evening. But up next is the My Say segment with Nimanin Delembatiki. Good night.